At first, nothing seemed unusual. Russian commanders sat back, confident, almost bored, watching screens they believed they had memorized. Donbas had followed a pattern for months now. Artillery would soften the ground. Armor would push forward. Ukrainian resistance would flare, then fade. It was supposed to be another routine advance, another slow grind toward a victory Moscow had already announced in speeches and headlines. Then the radios went quiet. Not jammed, not damaged, just silent. No frantic Ukrainian chatter, no desperate calls for support. Even the distant thunder of return fire vanished, swallowed by an unnatural stillness that crept across the battlefield. For a moment, Russian officers assumed this was fear. Collapse. The sound of an enemy finally breaking. They were wrong. Without warning, the night ignited. Precision strikes tore through the darkness, landing not randomly, but deliberately, as if guided by an invisible hand. Ammunition depots erupted in perfect sequence. Command vehicles vanished in blinding flashes. Bridges thought to be secure disappeared beneath columns of fire. Every strike landed where it hurt most, and every second felt planned. Confusion spread faster than flames. Orders contradicted each other. Maps no longer matched reality. Units advanced into emptiness, only to realize supply lines behind them had already been severed. What should have been chaos felt terrifyingly organized, like stepping into a trap that had been waiting patiently for its moment. Across Donbas, the same story unfolded. Silence, then devastation. Russian confidence cracked as officers began to understand this wasn't a lucky night or a single ambush. This was coordination on a scale they hadn't seen since the war began. Someone had studied them. Someone had anticipated every move. The realization settled heavily, stripping away months of arrogance and rehearsed certainty. Panic followed understanding. Messages flooded command channels too late, while field units waited for guidance that never arrived, staring into darkness that suddenly felt hostile and unforgiving. And somewhere beyond the front lines, Ukrainian operators watched calmly as the plan executed itself, strike after strike, phase after phase. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just results. By dawn, entire sections of the battlefield had been rewritten. Positions Russia considered untouchable were gone. The momentum they believed was inevitable had evaporated in a single, unforgettable night. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography, and Ukraine had been planning it for months. Donbas was never just another front on a map. To Russia, it was the prize that justified everything that came before it. Years of bloodshed, sanctions, isolation, and loss were all meant to culminate here, in a region Moscow claimed as proof of destiny fulfilled. Seize Donbas, declare victory, rewrite the narrative. That was the plan sold to generals, to state television, to a restless public waiting for something to show for the cost. For Ukraine, Donbas meant something entirely different. It was home. Factories, coal mines, rail lines, and towns built by generations who refused to vanish quietly. Losing it would not just redraw borders, it would fracture morale, disrupt the economy, and signal to the world that endurance had limits. Every village mattered because every village told a story about who belonged, who decided, and who refused to be erased. That is why the stakes here were absolute. This was not about gaining ground, it was about defining the war itself. Russia needed Donbas to prove its power still intimidated neighbors and bent history to its will. Ukraine needed Donbas to prove that independence was not a slogan, but a reality defended inch by inch, regardless of cost. The world watched with cautious detachment. Western analysts ran simulations. Commentators debated timelines. Many quietly assumed that if Ukraine were ever to falter, it would happen here, under the weight of Russia's massed artillery and endless reserves. Even allies prepared explanations for why the inevitable might soon arrive. What almost no one saw was how differently Ukraine was approaching the problem. While Russia fixated on numbers, tonnage, and brute force, Ukraine focused on meaning. On timing, on understanding not just where the enemy was, but how it thought. Donbas became a test not of who had more weapons, but of who understood the battlefield as a living system, shaped by people, morale, and patience. Russian generals believed momentum was on their side. Western experts believed Ukraine was running out of options. Both sides agreed on one thing: whatever happened in Donbas would decide the direction of the war. What followed would expose that miscalculation in ways that reshaped strategy, shattered confidence, and forced the world to reconsider who truly held the advantage moving forward. They were right about that. They were wrong about almost everything else. Because while Russia was counting tanks and artillery, Ukraine was counting something else entirely. Russia entered Donbas convinced the outcome was already written. Their doctrine was built for a different century, one where mass overwhelmed finesse and obedience mattered more than insight. Command flowed downward through rigid hierarchies, rewarding loyalty over truth. Reports were polished to please superiors, not to reflect reality on the ground. By the time bad news reached the top, it had already been filtered, softened, and stripped of urgency. Generals studied maps instead of terrain. They trusted arrows and symbols more than human behavior, assuming fear would do the work artillery could not. Units were ordered forward on schedules set weeks earlier, regardless of losses or changing conditions. Flexibility was treated as weakness, improvisation as insubordination. The system punished adaptation, even as the battlefield demanded it. Corruption hollowed everything further. Equipment inventories looked impressive on paper, yet critical supplies vanished long before reaching the front. Maintenance budgets became private fortunes. Vehicles rolled into combat already compromised, crews forced to improvise repairs with scraps. Soldiers learned quickly that survival depended less on planning than on luck, and luck was in short supply. At the human level, expendability was policy. Mobilized troops were rotated through Donbas like replaceable parts, trained just enough to march, rarely enough to think. Losses were absorbed without reflection, explained away as necessary sacrifice. When morale faltered, propaganda filled the gap, promising glory while ignoring reality. Slogans replaced strategy, and repetition stood in for results. This worldview bred dangerous certainty. Russian leadership believed Ukraine would eventually tire, that pressure alone would fracture resolve. They mistook restraint for weakness, patience for paralysis. Every Ukrainian withdrawal was framed as collapse, every pause as panic. The possibility that Ukraine was choosing when and where to fight never truly registered. Confidence hardened into blindness. Warning signs were dismissed as anomalies. Failed assaults were blamed on individual incompetence, never systemic flaws. The idea that an outgunned opponent could outthink them felt insulting, even impossible. To admit that would mean admitting decay at the core of their own power. Meanwhile, the gap between rhetoric and reality widened. State television projected inevitability while frontline commanders scrambled to explain disappearing units and broken supply chains. The louder the messaging grew, the less it reflected what was happening beyond the cameras. Russia wasn't adjusting its strategy, it was narrating over its failures. It also shaped how Russian leaders listened, or refused to listen. Officers who raised concerns were sidelined, reports rewritten, careers quietly stalled. Reality became negotiable, especially when it conflicted with Moscow's preferred story. Success was declared early and often, turning setbacks into public relations problems rather than strategic warnings. Over time, belief replaced verification. If the narrative said progress was inevitable, then progress simply had to be true. This closed loop insulated decision makers from consequence, allowing the same mistakes to repeat while confidence remained untouched. Donbas was approached not as a complex fight, but as a stage where certainty could be performed endlessly, without accountability. And dissent slowly disappeared from rooms where decisions should have been challenged openly again. That was the fatal mistake. Arrogance replaced analysis, habit replaced learning, and as Russia doubled down on a vision of war that no longer existed, it failed to notice the most dangerous shift of all. They thought Ukraine would break. Instead, Ukraine was learning, fast. Ukraine did not enter this war with abundance. It entered with limits, fewer aircraft, aging air defenses, systems inherited from another era, repaired again and again under fire. Cities learned the sound of incoming missiles before sunrise. Soldiers learned to fight while exhausted, outnumbered, and watched constantly from the sky. There was no illusion of comfort, no promise that help would arrive in time. What existed instead was resolve. Engineers worked in basements and garages, rewiring systems meant to be obsolete. Operators learned enemy patterns the way musicians learn rhythm, noticing pauses, repetitions, and mistakes. Every failure became data. Every loss became a lesson paid for in blood. Adaptation was not optional, it was survival. Ukraine's greatest advantage was not technology, but temperament. Under pressure, panic never became policy. Decisions were decentralized, trusted downward, refined upward. When something failed, it was acknowledged immediately, not hidden. Commanders listened to the people closest to the fight. Soldiers were not treated as expendable symbols, but as thinking participants whose lives mattered. Civilians were never an afterthought. Air defenses were repositioned to shield neighborhoods, not just infrastructure. Evacuations were coordinated alongside operations. The goal was never spectacle, but protection. That moral clarity anchored everything else. It reminded those fighting why they endured the sleepless nights and constant loss. Allies noticed. Support did not arrive as miracles, but as tools Ukraine learned to integrate quickly. New systems were absorbed, modified, and blended into existing doctrine within weeks. Training happened under bombardment. Coordination improved in real time. Ukraine did not wait to become perfect before acting. It acted, adjusted, and acted again. What emerged was a culture of learning under fire. Mistakes were dissected, not denied. Successes were shared, not hoarded. Small units gained autonomy, confidence, and trust. Information moved faster than fear. The battlefield became a classroom where survival demanded creativity and honesty. Ukraine studied itself as closely as it studied its enemy, refining instincts into strategy. Most importantly, unity held. Soldiers defended towns where their families still lived. Civilians supported units they could name. The distance between front line and home front collapsed into shared purpose. Everyone understood what was at stake, and everyone contributed what they could. By the time Russia prepared its next wave, Ukraine was no longer reacting. It was anticipating. Patterns had been mapped, assumptions tested, weaknesses quietly marked, and when the next wave of missiles came, Ukraine was ready. Pressure returned to Donbas with a vengeance. Russian missiles streaked across the sky in relentless waves, followed by drones probing for weakness, followed by armor grinding forward as if mass alone could force history to comply. The tempo increased, the noise returned, and Moscow told itself the silence from before had been a fluke. But this time, the response was different. Ukrainian air defenses no longer reacted blindly. They anticipated. Launch windows were read, trajectories predicted, decoys identified. Missiles disappeared mid-air. Drones fell before reaching their targets. Each interception denied Russia not just firepower, but certainty. Every failed strike forced recalculation, and recalculation cost time Russia no longer had. On the ground, armored columns advanced into corridors that looked open, only to find themselves funneled, slowed, and exposed. Ambushes unfolded with brutal efficiency. Precision mattered more than volume. Small units struck, vanished, and struck again, turning movement into liability. The battlefield narrowed around Russian forces, compressing their options until retreat and advance felt equally dangerous. Russia responded the only way it knew how: more. More missiles, more drones, more pressure applied faster, louder, and with less coordination. Commanders demanded results on impossible timelines. Orders overlapped, conflicted, and arrived too late. Frustration bled into urgency, urgency into panic. The harder they pushed, the less control they retained. Ukraine moved in the opposite direction. Discipline tightened. Fire was withheld until it mattered. Targets were prioritized, not exhausted. Communication remained calm, almost restrained, even as explosions lit the horizon. Every successful defense reinforced confidence, not bravado. The system worked because it was trusted. With each passing hour, the contrast sharpened. Russia's attacks grew louder but less effective, impressive in scale yet hollow in impact. Ukraine's responses grew quieter and deadlier, defined by timing rather than spectacle. Momentum shifted not in dramatic leaps, but through accumulation, denial, and exhaustion. What had begun as escalation became exposure. Russian units realized they were being shaped, guided into reactions Ukraine had already prepared for. The sky was contested. The ground was mapped. Surprise was gone. Across the front, observers could feel the shift even without maps or briefings. The rhythm had changed. Russian forces fought the moment in front of them, reacting to pressure they could not fully see. Ukraine fought the sequence, treating each exchange as a step towards something larger. Interceptions were logged, routes memorized, responses refined. Nothing was wasted, nothing was rushed. The escalation itself became a tool, drawing out habits, exposing weaknesses, and conditioning expectations. By continuing to answer every push with measured precision, Ukraine lulled its opponent into believing this was the ceiling of resistance. It was not. It was rehearsal, carried out under fire, while something far more decisive quietly took shape beyond the noise. Waiting silently, timing patiently, confident the moment would arrive exactly when chosen by Ukraine. And as Russian commanders searched for a decisive blow to restore control, Ukraine prepared its own answer, unseen, deliberate, and irreversible. Then came the operation that shattered every assumption Moscow had left. It began without announcement. No speeches, no warnings, no visible surge of activity to signal what was coming. In fact, the most unsettling sign was the absence of noise. Ukrainian radios went quiet across key sectors, not from disruption, but by design. To Russian commanders, it looked like hesitation. To Ukraine, it was the opening note. Then the pattern shifted. Decoy movements appeared where Ukraine had previously withdrawn, drawing Russian attention toward familiar targets. Drones showed just enough activity to confirm old assumptions. Russian units adjusted, repositioned, and committed reserves exactly where Ukraine expected them to go. Every response tightened the trap, though no one inside it could yet see the walls. Behind that distraction, the real operation unfolded. Intelligence gathered over months activated in minutes. Precision strikes severed logistics hubs with surgical restraint. Rail lines feeding the front went dark. Fuel depots ignited in carefully spaced intervals. Communication nodes failed one by one.